Hi, today we are going to talk about what is a batch class. So, a batch class in Salesforce is the way using which you can process large volumes of data. It runs asynchronously, and what it does is it breaks the data into smaller chunks and then it processes. So basically, you don't run into governor limits. So let's say if you want to update, let's say, 1 million records, you cannot do it straight away using Apex because your Apex will run into governor limits. You can update only 10,000 records into a single transaction, and you can query up to 50,000 records in a single transaction. So that's where a batch class comes in to rescue you. Why do we use a batch class, or why do we need to do these large updates? Is primarily you need to do a data cleanup, you need to do some mass, you need to do some daily processing which runs on a daily basis, or you want to do some reporting or rollups. That's why you need a batch class. Now, the batch class has primarily three prime methods. The first one is called start method, where basically the question is what data I need to process in this batch class. So basically, you would write an SQL query there. You would use database.query locator, which would basically query all the data that you want to run or you want your batch class to run for. It can handle up to 50 million records. So what query locator basically does is it fetches all the data in your SQL query, and then it passes a chunk of that data to your execute method. So now we are going to talk about consider it as your for condition. An execute method is basically, what basically runs inside the loop. So let's say your SQL query returns 10,000 records, 10, and let's say your batch size is 2,000. So you would have 5 batches of 2,000 each. And your execute method will run 5 times for those 2,000 records. So what you can do is in your execute method, you would write the actual logic, what needs to happen. So let's say you want to update, you want to run some logic and update certain field on your account, you want to maybe do some calculations, something like that, then that can be done within your execute method. And you can also do DMLs within this execute method. And each execute method gets a fresh set of governor limits. So this is each execute method is a separate transaction in itself. So you don't need to worry about your governor limits. Now, the last one in this series of methods is finish method, which basically when everything is done, what do you want your batch job to do? In some cases, you don't want to do anything, but in most of the cases, you would like to send out an email saying batch job has been finished. This is the success number. This is the failure number. Or you want to create like maybe you have a custom logging object within your Salesforce and you want to log data into it as in how your batch job performed. So that's where your finish method comes in. Now let's go and look inside the Salesforce developer console, how your batch job looks like. We saw briefly in the previous video that the batch job, how is a batch job written basically? So batch example, and it implements database.batchable. This is a must have in order for you to use batch class. And then here are the three methods which we just spoke about. Each method needs to have a database.batchable context. This is a mandatory thing to be passed on. And then your execute method will also have a parameter of list of the object that you are querying for, and the variable is generally called scope. So let's say in our case, we are getting select ID comma name from account. So it will query all the accounts in the database right now. So Salesforce does give us, by default, you would have, let's go to service console. All right, 1 second. So basically, Salesforce does give you some accounts by default. So as you can see, we have about 13 accounts here. So let's query ID dot name of all of these. And in execute, what do we want to do is, let's say we create a for loop, and then for each of the account that we are getting in the scope, we want to create a list of account updated ACCD list, and I'm equal to new list. So what do we want to do is, let's say we want to update the what should we update in the rating of each of these, and let's set the rating of each of these accounts as hot. Okay. So how do we do that? So account dot rating is equal to hot, and then we will put this inside the list. And once we come out of the loop, we'll say date, say yes, right? And then within the finish, we can send out an email or we can create a log of it. Still says there's some error. Batch, right? So this is the way to execute the batch. So we will go to execute anonymous and run the batch. This is the name of our class batch example. And because we only have data of, so we will not use the batch size of 20. Let's use batch size of 5. So what will basically happen is because we have 13 records, so it will create 3 batches, 5, 5, and 3. And then in the start, it will query all the 13 records. Then it will create batch of 3, 3 batches, 5, 5, and 3 records. And then within execute, it will run this in a loop. 3 times the execute method will be executed. And then we would see our accounts being updated. So let's see what happens. So I'll execute this now, and let's see where we can track this as well. So if you go in Apex jobs in your setup, you will see your batch job, and if you can see the total batches as 3, and the Apex class was batch example, and this has just finished processing as well. Since it has finished processing, let's see the updated value here. We don't have the rating field, so we can add the rating field here. See, all of these are showing as hot. So that's the advantage of using batch classes, how quickly it completed these 3 batches, and it was so seamless. Nothing happened on the screen and everything worked just in the background. So that's the advantage of using batch jobs. They are extremely powerful. They can use, work in the background, use available system capacity and make the changes. Wish you good luck.